Welcome to another Deep Dive Listener, where we extract those golden nuggets of knowledge.
And today we're doing things a little differently.
Yeah, we are.
We're going to be diving into a fictional story
Yes, a story called Temporal Tides.
where daylight saving time gets a hilarious and mind-bending twist.
Big time.
Yeah.
So to really kind of get you into this world, we're going to start with a dramatic reading.
A dramatic reading of excerpts from Temporal Tides.
Yes, think of it like a radio play, but with time travel.
A time travel twist.
Yes, and then in part two.
In part two, we're going to be breaking down some of the themes and ideas.
Oh yeah, we're going to get into it.
That bubble up from this very unique story.
Okay, so
So without further ado,
let's dim the lights
let's set the stage.
and jump right in.
To the world of Temporal Tides.
The story begins with Evelyn Hall on a crisp autumn morning.
But this
is no ordinary November day. Evelyn Hall stood on her front porch, her breath fogging in the crisp autumn air.
It was November 3rd, 1964.
Again, she tightened her grip around her mug of coffee, her knuckles white.
The neighborhood looked like something out of an old photograph.
The cars, the clothing, the black and white television flickering through her neighbor's window,
Yet it was all real. The world had shifted once more with the end of daylight saving time.
leaving Evelyn and everyone else to contend with the past.
With their memories of 2024 strangely intact.
The initial panic had subsided after the first shift a year ago,
When the clocks had fallen back in the fall of 2023.
and the world had inexplicably shifted back 60 years to 1963
People had learned to adapt.
to navigate the temporal tides that swept them back and forth through history.
But the disorientation never got any easier.
And each shift seemed to chip away at people's resolve.
Evelyn sighed and set her mug down.
The steam curling up into the morning sky.
There was work to be done.
She walked down the street, her eyes scanning the people who had emerged from their homes.
Some of them still in shock.
Others resign.
And a few already attempting to find their place in this new old world.
Evelyn spotted Javier Torres,
A teenager who looked utterly lost.
staring at the world around him as though it might vanish at any moment.
She made her way over to him.
Javier, right?
He looked up, eyes wide.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
This is insane. Evelyn nodded, offering a small smile.
You're not alone.
We're all in this together.
Come on, let's head to the community center.
We need to start organizing.
Figure out what we have and what we need. Javier hesitated, then nodded.
He followed her, grateful for her calm presence.
Evelyn had become something of an anchor in these shifting times.
A history professor by trade,
She had stepped up when others faltered.
using her knowledge to help people navigate the complexities of each era they found themselves thrust into. The community center was already buzzing with activity,
People gathered in small groups.
sharing information and trying to make sense of their new reality.
Evelyn moved among them, offering reassurance and guidance where she could.
They needed to work together if they were going to survive the constant shifting.
As the months passed, they settled into 1964 as best they could.
Javier found work at a local garage.
His mechanical skills easily adapted to the older cars.
Evelyn continued to teach, though. Now her classroom was filled with adults as well as children.
People eager to learn about the world they had been thrust into.
And how best to navigate it.
Arthur Johnson, a businessman in his 70s, had begun making calculated investments.
Using his knowledge of future events to position himself for success. And then spring arrived.
And with it,
Daylight saving time.
as the clocks moved forward, Javier stood in his small apartment.
Staring at the clock on the wall.
The second hand ticked down to the moment of change.
And he braced himself.
The world seemed to shimmer.
A ripple passing through reality.
And suddenly he was standing in a different room. The decor was garish.
Bright colors and strange patterns that hurt his eyes.
He blinked, disoriented.
As a song blared from a nearby radio.
It was 1987. He stumbled outside, looking around at the transformed neighborhood.
People were emerging from their homes, just as they had in 1964.
The disorientation was palpable.
But this time there was also a sense of familiarity.
They had done this before.
They could do it again.
Evelyn found Javier a few hours later standing on a street corner, his eyes wide as he took in the changes.
She smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder.
Welcome to the 80s.
He let out a shaky laugh.
This is insane.
Every time I think I'm getting used to it,
I know.
Evelyn replied.
We'll get through it.
We always do. But just as they were settling into the vibrant chaos of the 80s,
The clocks turned back again, and with the arrival of fall, the world shifted once more.
oh boy.
Javier felt the familiar ripple of disorientation as he opened his eyes
Oh,
to find himself standing in a completely different landscape.
wow.
The buildings around him were older, the streets quieter.
Hmm.
He blinked, trying to process the change.
So where is he now?
It was November 1927.
Wow, it's a big jump.
It is.
It's fascinating how this story juxtaposes the lightheartedness of time travel with these very real historical events. This time jump takes them right into the heart of the Roaring Twenties. But with the Great Depression looming on the horizon, it's not all flapper dresses and jazz music.
Right?
What do you think it would feel like to be constantly thrown into these different worlds, knowing what's to come?
It certainly adds a layer of dramatic tension to the story.
It does.
And it makes you think about how our own knowledge of history shapes our perception of the present.
Absolutely.
But let's see how our characters navigate this new old world. Evelyn was quick to gather the people she could find.
Good for her.
The disarray was even more apparent this time, the jump back into an era with even less familiarity,
I know.
shaking people's already fragile sense of stability.
Yeah, but
The Great Depression loomed on the horizon, and Evelyn knew that they had to prepare.
of course.
She gathered everyone at the community center,
Which is now
now an old church,
an old church. Wow.
and started organizing again.
You know, this image of the community center transformed into a church is really striking. It speaks to the way these time shifts force them to adapt, not just physically, but also in terms of their community spaces and support systems.
Right.
It's a reminder that even in the face of chaos, humans have this incredible ability to find ways to connect and help each other.
Absolutely. And we see that resilience reflected in the actions of the characters.
What's Arthur up to?
Arthur, with his knowledge of history,
He's going to use it, I bet.
took advantage of the stock market, trying to position himself to minimize losses and perhaps even profit.
Of course he is.
Tasha Patel worked with Evelyn to gather supplies, fearing the hardship they knew was coming.
Yeah, they're the smart ones.
They had to find a way to survive the impending economic collapse, all while hoping for the next shift to bring them to a better time.
It's interesting how each character's response to these time shifts reveals something about their personality.
It does.
Evelyn is the pragmatic leader focused on the immediate needs of the community. Tasha is thinking long-term, trying to understand the bigger picture. And Arthur, well, he's playing the system,
Arthur's always working an angle.
using his foreknowledge in a way that's both clever and perhaps a bit morally ambiguous.
It raises an intriguing question. What would you do if you had knowledge of the future?
It's a classic time travel dilemma. Would you use that knowledge for personal gain, or would you try to change the course of history?
Perhaps both desires would war within us.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're still in 1927 with the Great Depression looming. How is Javier coping in this new old world?
Javier found himself working in a factory, the physical labor exhausting but necessary.
Oh, man.
He missed the technology of his own time, the ease of communication, the music, the culture.
Yeah, I bet.
But each day, Ellen's quiet determination helped him push through.
That's good.
They were all in this together, and they would endure.
There's a real sense of camaraderie between them, wouldn't you say?
I would.
Even though they're thrown into these crazy situations, they find strength in each other.
They do.
It's a reminder that even when the world feels like it's falling apart, human connection can be a powerful anchor. But speaking of things falling apart, spring is just around the corner, and we know what that means, another time jump.
Spring arrived once more, and with it, daylight saving time.
Here we go again.
As the clocks moved forward, the world shimmered and shifted, and suddenly Javier found himself in yet another unfamiliar room.
Okay.
The decor was simpler, post-war optimism seeping through the walls. It was 1950.
Okay, listener, picture this. We've gone from the cusp of the Great Depression to the post-war boom. It's 1950 poodle skirts diners, a sense of hope in the air. What a contrast.
It's a reminder that time isn't always linear.
That's for sure.
It can twist and turn, taking us on unexpected detours, and sometimes those detours, while disorienting, can lead us to moments of unexpected beauty and possibility.
I like that, a reminder that even in the midst of chaos, there's always hope. But let's see how our characters are reacting to this new decade.
Evelyn found him once again, her smile, weary but genuine.
I bet.
We're in the 50s now.
At least it's not the Great Depression.
Javier laughed a sound that held both exhaustion and relief.
Yeah, I guess we can be thankful for that.
Arthur, ever the opportunist, began investing in emerging industries, using his knowledge to once again try to stay ahead of the curve.
Of course.
Tasha, meanwhile, continued her research, growing increasingly concerned about the impact of the shifts on the world.
Oh.
She feared that the constant back and forth was causing irreparable damage, and she was determined to find a way to stop it.
It's fascinating how Temporal Tides blends these personal journeys with a larger question. What is the impact of these time shifts on the world as a whole?
Right.
It's a question we often grapple with in real life, too, isn't it? We make decisions big and small, and those decisions ripple outward, impacting not just our own lives, but the world around us.
Indeed, but in this story, the consequences are magnified by the scale of the time jumps.
Yeah, for sure.
Each shift alters the course of history in ways they can't fully comprehend. And Tasha, with her scientific mind and her deep concern for the planet, is beginning to see the potential for disaster.
It's a sobering thought, but for now, our characters are caught in this cycle, lurching from one decade to another, trying to make sense of it all.
As the years pass, the shifts continued, always tied to the changing of the clocks for daylight saving time.
Wow.
Each fall, the world would jump back, and each spring, it would leap forward.
It's wild.
People adapted, though it never got any easier. Evelyn became a symbol of resilience, helping communities stay connected and informed. Javier grew into adulthood, his youthful fear replaced by a steely determination.
Good for him.
Arthur's wealth grew with each shift, though he found himself increasingly haunted by the consequences of his actions.
Oh, that's interesting.
And Tasha, always searching, began to uncover the truth, a ritual tampered with a cycle that was never meant to be broken.
Whoa! Okay, things are getting interesting. A tampered ritual that adds a whole new dimension to this daylight saving time dilemma.
On the 10th year, as the clocks prepared to fall back once more, Evelyn, Tasha, Javier, and Arthur found themselves together.
Okay.
They had uncovered evidence of an ancient ritual, one that had been tampered with by modern technology, a ritual that was never meant to be broken.
So it's not just a random quirk of time. There's a reason behind these shifts, and it sounds like our characters might have a chance to set things right. But what will they choose? What would you
But now
do?
they faced a choice. Try to stop the cycle, risking everything.
Oh my gosh.
Or let it continue, knowing that the world would remain forever at the mercy of the temporal tides.
That's where we'll leave you hanging. For now, listener, we'll be back in the final part of our deep dive to explore that choice and the resolution of this time-bending tale. But in the meantime, think about what you would do if you were in their shoes. Would you try to fix the past, or would you accept the chaotic reality of these temporal tides?
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, listener.
Back again?
When we left off our time-tossed, heroes had uncovered the source of their temporal troubles.
A tampered, yes, tied to the seemingly innocuous practice of daylight saving time.
And now they face a choice.
Do they try to break the cycle?
Or do they accept this strange new reality?
It's a decision point that takes the story beyond a simple time travel adventure. It forces us to consider the consequences of our actions, even when those actions are driven by good intentions.
Right, because who knows what could happen if they try to mess with this ancient ritual.
Exactly.
But at the same time, can they just stand by and let these chaotic time shifts continue?
It's a real nail-biter.
It certainly is. But before we get to their decision, let's take a moment to appreciate the journey they've been on. They've faced challenges in each era, from the cultural clashes of the 1960s to the economic hardships of the Great Depression. They've witnessed history firsthand, both its triumphs and its tragedies.
And they've done it all together, supporting each other through thick and thin. It makes you wonder, listener, how these shared experiences have shaped their relationships. Do you think they've grown closer because of the time shifts, or has the constant uncertainty driven them apart?
It's a question worth pondering, but for now, let's return to the story and see what choice they make.
The suspense is killing me.
Evelyn looked at her friends, the weight of the years pressing down on her.
Yeah,
We can't keep living like this.
I bet.
We need to take control of our own time.
That line, listener, really gets to the heart of the story. It's not just about stopping the time jumps. It's about reclaiming their agency, their right to shape their own destinies. What an empowering moment.
And Tasha, ever the determined one, echoes that sentiment.
Let's hear it.
Tasha nodded, her eyes filled with determination.
Right.
Then let's do it.
Let's break the cycle.
Together, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever the future or the past had in store for them. And that, dear listener, is where our excerpt ends, full of suspense, possibility, and a glimmer of hope.
It's a classic cliffhanger, leaving us to imagine what happens next.
I don't know about you, but I'm dying to know. If they succeed, do they manage to break the cycle? Does time return to normal? Well, for that, you'll have to seek out the full story of Temporal Tides. But even without knowing the ending, I think there are some fascinating takeaways here.
Absolutely. This story has taken us on quite a ride, hasn't it?
Mm.
We've laughed at the cultural clashes, pondered the ethical dilemmas, and maybe even shed a tear or two for these characters and their time-tossed lives.
It's a reminder that even the most fantastical tales can hold a mirror to our own reality, prompting us to ask questions about ourselves, our choices, and our relationship with the world around us.
So, dear listener, as we wrap up this deep dive into temporal tides, we want to leave you with a final thought. If you could travel through time knowing what you know now, which era would you choose to visit, and what would you do with that knowledge of the future?
Would you use it to change the course of history?
Would you?
Or would you simply observe, taking in the wonders and the follies of the past? The choice, as always, is yours.
Thank you for joining us on this unique deep dive, listener. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the spirit of adventure alive.
And remember, whether you're springing forward or falling back, time is a precious gift. Make the most of every